Hi, this is Dean Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and I'm going to talk about VirtualBox and how to install it. This is an 8-minute video, and here I've gone to the VirtualBox and downloaded the VirtualBox images and the extension packs. I'm downloading those to my local machine. You'll see for our purposes, there's an 18 meg file and a 91 meg file. That's going to take up more room on the local box. Oracle VirtualBox Extension Pack is a really great tool that will go ahead and enable a whole bunch of extra features. They don't put it into the default install just because it's got some extra stuff in it. I suggest that you download the technical documentation, at least the end user documentation, in the PDF version. This thing is a little large. 379 pages seems a lot for a user's manual, but download it and drop it into your readings. I put mine into my readings folder for CyberMaster training and saved it to something that I would actually remember for a long period of time. They're always updating this on versions. Okay, let's get rid of the actual browser window and go ahead and open up the DMG file. This will vary based on your operating system install, but it's basically the same. You double click on the VirtualBox image and it's up and running. It'll do a verification for you and you say, yes, I want to do this. And at this point in time, it says, let's install the virtual pack. You have to key in credentials in a lot of cases to install the extension pack. So at this point, I'm zooming in and I'm letting you see what's actually going on in doing an actual install. What I did was I zoomed in and I turned on a new one and I named it and I chose the operating system that I wanted to install. It'll ask me what version, and I'm choosing Ubuntu at this point because I'm going to do a Kali Linux install. So we're going to go through each one of the configurations on each one of the sheet tabs so you can understand it. It's going to ask me how big the memory is. I've got to look at this in relation to the memory on my machine itself. In this case, I have 16 gigs of RAM, so I need to realize that I have limitations there. I'm going to boost this up to 2 gigs of RAM. To run Kali reliably, you need about 4 gigs of RAM. Then it's going to create virtual disk, and I'm going to let it create the virtual hard disk in a location that's reasonable for me. I happen to have already pre-picked this. And then I'm going to choose the standard VirtualBox image. I can use VMDK files, which are portable over to VMware. Between dynamic and fixed size, I like fixed size, even though it consumes a lot of resources. Disk space is cheap, and it makes it go more efficiently. It's going to ask me to select a virtual hard disk, again in megabytes of size, and I'm going to set it in a correct location that works for me. Notice that I've put this in a folder called CMT Labs. You might want to put it in VMware. I'll show you my other setup in a later video. Name the folder, put it into the correct folder. Make sure that you set the configurations for Oracle VirtualBox to default to that location over and over and over again, unless you have some other detailed filing system. It'll give you the full list, and then we'll go on after the file location has been created. You'll notice this does take a couple of seconds for it to do it because it is actually apportioning all of the drive space, in my case with the fixed one. Drive space is cheap. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at different components. We're going to zoom into the system settings. I've named it. I've got the correct version right there. It tells me where my snapshots are, and I always disable drag and drop. In my description area, since these don't matter, I put the actual password in the description area because I always forget it. So put the password, the details, the networking things, the things that shouldn't change that you're not going to remember. There is disk encryption. We're not going to do it in this case, but if you need to protect it, you can do disk encryption, but that will not allow you to get in and boot the machine. Notice that when we enable the disk encryption, it's going to force us to do a password to get into that actual boot device. Now we go over to System. It sets up the base memory, and we can change this as long as it's not running. Make sure that your boot order is in the right format. So if you're building it to begin with, you want to go ahead and boot to the hard disk, but there'll be nothing on it. Boot second to optical. If you go and look at the display, if you go and look at the processors, you can change the different processors. I'm going to boost mine up to 2 virtual processors, and I'm going to strip it down to about 90% execution cap, just in case. I leave all the acceleration stuff alone. You can go ahead and change para virtualization interfaces if you want to. I leave the defaults here. KVM is one of the things that we talked about in class. Next is display. I always boost the video memory up just a little bit to give me an extra punch to look at things, especially when I'm capturing things in video. I always enable the remote server and note the port there. We'll explain that in a later video. I set up to null so that you can get straight into it. You can go in there and allow multiple connections. You can also enable video capturing. So we do video capturing outside of the VM, but you can also do it inside of the VM. It will only capture the VM process. It will not capture any of your screen around it. At this point, I'm going to choose another ISO to get into, and I chose Kali Linux ISO, and I can delete the empty here if I want to. But that ISO is going to allow me, just like if I were to shove a DVD in, to actually boot that ISO. And there I can delete the extra ISO. If I need to change any of my audio settings, I do. I typically disable the enable audio settings. And I leave the network address, set up to network address translation. You should be looking at those in further videos and understanding that you can enable multiple adapters. Here I'm only doing one adapter, but I have many different configurations on that. As far as the advanced is concerned, I can change the type of network card that the virtual machine actually believes in, and I can also adjust my MAC address. I can also set up port forwarding, which would be important if you're running this in an odd environment. I don't mess with any of the serial ports or the USB. I leave it all to the default. As far as shared folders, this is when you could do dragging and dropping. We don't. And then there's a full-blown user interface setup. That gets all my settings ready, and now I'm ready to go ahead and boot this machine. It's going to boot into that ISO. At this point, when this boots, this is usually a 30-minute install, and I just compressed it down to a couple of seconds so that you could go ahead and answer all the questions really quickly. But that's beyond the scope of this video. We were just trying to figure out what it looks like to actually get your VirtualBox installed and to set up for your first install itself. You're going to be doing lots of installs. You'll notice here on the left-hand side that I have about 10 images showing in this particular video. That's it for Oracle VirtualBox, and thank you.